Grim town in a steep valley. This valley, as if a huge, dull, primordial axe once slammed into the earth and then withdrew innumerable millennia ago. A few flat acres, ribbon either side of the river, sliding sluggishly past the clock tower, the convenience store. If a river could look over its shoulder, glad to be going, this one would. In town center, a factory of clangor and stink, of grinding and oil, hard howls from drill bits biting sheets of steel. All my brothers live here, every cousin, many dozens of sisters, my worn aunts and numb uncles, the many, many of me, 100 sad wives, all of us countrymen and women born next to each other behind the plow in this valley, each of us. Pressing to our chests a loaf of bread and a jug of milk. The river is low this time of year, and the bedstone's blackness marks its lack of depth. A shopping cart lies on its side in center stream, gathering branches, detritus, silt, forcing the already weak current to part for it, dividing it. But even so diminished, it's glad to be going, glad to be gone. Thomas Lux, I wanted to bring him here because he's not here, and I have the honor of not replacing him, but working instead of him. And I just wanted to have him here, and I can't read like him. The exaggeration that I put in my reading is only 1/17 of how he reads. Thomas Lux, I moved to America when I was 48, and a few years later, I decided that I wanted to learn to write in English and that I wanted to write in English. And I went to Warren Wilson College, and Thomas Lux was my first teacher. And the way he read is how I heard American for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I would just like to talk about that cadence, that love of words, how he chews them, how he wants us to hear the stresses. So let's look at the first 3 lines in this, how this poem is paced, and how well he chose a scansion that illustrates what we will be shown about the town. This valley has 2 strong stresses, or a spondee, and as a double axe blow would do, right? And the line continues as if a huge, dull, primordial axe once slammed into the earth. That's how he speaks. I mean, when he orders a Coke at a restaurant, he speaks like that, you know. The repeated spondees in these lines rhythmically emphasize the image. And the second line starts with what I just want to say, sound smart, so I'm going to say it. It's called a molossus, which is 3 stresses, right? Once slammed in, right? The valley's sides are quite steep, but the valley itself is flat, as the next line illustrates. And then withdrew innumerable millennia ago. That takes so much more time to say than the first few syllables and words in the poem. Now, look at that short little line that immediately follows. A few flat acres. The brevity of those 4 short words rendering a banal picture of an unremarkable town. Also, the alliterated spondee, few, flat, does a beautiful job tonally. And then the line is followed by one of the 2 longest lines in the poem, ribbon either side of the river sliding sluggishly, right? So the sounds inform the action, right? Sliding sluggishly. Beautiful. Here again, Lux illustrate what the line says, what his line says by the length, also by the length of the line on the page. Because this image is seen from the point of view of the river looking back over its shoulder, we feel it's also the speaker identifying with the river, because he says, if a river could look over its shoulder, glad to be going, this one would. Another molossus, right? 1, 2, 3. In the next sentence, Lux juxtaposes the old, quaint parts of the town, the parts of the town that still remain from the time when the town was livable. And in this line, a list of 2, the 2 parts are of equal weight, both church and convenience store being the other place where people meet. It had a church, a convenience store, and the factory, right? For the people in the town are only merely part of the factory in town center, its heart. And so the next sentence, which is the longest in the poem, the brothers are described not as human being, but as being drill bits or sheets of steel. Only a small part, those humans, of the industry and economy's huge machine. And if you ignore the punctuation in that line, look at the superb metaphorical line that it is for the whole poem. Biting sheets of steel, all my brothers. You know, and that's what the town is about. And that's how replaceable all those brothers could be, and how they bit sheets of steel all their life. And now, after that line, we're told of who lives inside that city. And the lines breaks create a kind of list, starting with what could be read as an instruction. Live here, every cousin, many dozens, but it isn't, right? Then there's a lovely line break and subtle slant rhyme there. Cousins, dozens, as well in worn aunts and numb uncles, followed immediately by an unexpected and effective repetition, the many, many of me, followed by 100, which is also, says many, many, sad wives. This is the center of the poem, and also where the tension and emotion culminate. Then we come to the line, pressing to our chests a loaf of bread and a jug of milk. The river is low. The first line is a single thought, the preciousness to folks in the town of simple things, and the thought continues without new information and a jug of milk, which trails off. Note the lamenting O sounds in loaf and low and bedstone, all those lamenting, sad sounds. Lux is the master of that. He revises relentlessly to try to get as much sound and cadence, and also sounds that imitate the emotional heft of what he says. Where am I? I don't know where I am. Oh, the other precious commodity, pressed to chest, is negligible and not worthy of remaining, but this image is not sufficient to hold the line and needs to be boosted in that line by the return of the river, which is low. The 3-word line and the shortest line in the poem marks its lack, illustrates what it says by its own lack of syllables. It's also stressed by a near rhyme, mark, lack. And then finally we come to the 2 last lines, and the strong alliterations with a consonant G. It's glad to be going, glad to be gone. The shortness of the last line illustrated what it says by all the emptiness and white space that it leaves on the page. It's right there. It's going. It's almost gone. The page is almost going to become white very soon, right? And I was thinking also how when we need to find metaphors, when we need to find consolation, when we need to find something in poetry that will help us understand a political situation, whether we are on one side or the other. If we are divided, there are two sides, right? So there's one side and the other, and it doesn't matter what side you are. I was thinking of the beautiful metaphor that there is in this poem. The shopping cart lies on its side in the center of the stream, gathering branches, detritus, silt, forcing the already weak current to part for it, dividing it. But even so diminished, it's glad to be going, glad to be gone, right? And all of a sudden, this poem that he wrote, probably, I have no idea when he wrote it, I should have found out, but it is about 20 years ago. Now this has a completely different meaning because we read it today. Thank you.